We have the Director of Public Policy from the CNA. It's Michael Lighty is with us. Michael, can you hear me?
Hi, Jimmy. It's Michael Lighty.
There it is. All right, we got it. All right, fantastic. Hey, Michael, I'm so glad to have you on. Now, I don't know how much of the conversation you heard with Dave Dayen, who wrote that article in the Intercept, and it sounded to me like he was just upset that the CNA didn't put together a better bill, and that's really risking the chances for single payer passing because you put together such a bad bill. What do you have to say to that?
The bill is very solid. It's based on a piece of legislation that has passed the New York Assembly a couple times. We've worked from that to answer the question about why it's not SB 840. We're updating it in relation to the Affordable Care Act, and we've updated it further to be specific to California code and processes. What we were doing through the legislative process was precisely completing the bill because that's the only way to enact it. Now, there are issues we acknowledge around Prop 98 and the GAN limit and so forth, but the best way to deal with those is through the legislative process because you vet opinions, and ultimately the arbiter for passing legislation is Legislative Council, and they rule on the particulars of the language and how it meets various requirements, constitutional and otherwise. So if Speaker Rendon had let that process continue, then we would have heard amendments, discussed those amendments at Health Committee. We then would have moved on to the Appropriations Committee, where the financing would have been inserted and discussed, debated, voted on. And we would also, during that process, have gotten opinions from Legislative Council, from the Legislative Analyst's Office, and from the Department of Finance. And so the notion, as Dave puts out, that you're going to just go to the ballot lets the legislators off the hook. Why would they pass a bill, Jimmy, if they are just know that we're gonna go to the ballot? In fact, that's what Speaker Rendon said. You guys just forget about it, go to the ballot. Well, the fact is, I think Democrats, Republicans, Independents are tired of these legislators passing the buck, not doing their jobs. And in this case, they have a 2/3 majority of Democrats. They have a Democratic governor. There is a fierce urgency of now. I'm glad people like Dave can wait and say, yeah, well, let's just let this play out.
So, why do you think, so if Dave Dayen, which he is for single payer, and why do you think he would take that take on this issue? That seems so. It appears to me that Anthony Rendon is stopping the bill from being completed instead of trying to complete the bill. Like I said, if he's really for single payer and he's the leader in the assembly, don't you think he would know how to fix this? Don't you think he would have thought about this? Don't you think he would have a plan in his back pocket? Don't you think he would have talked with people in the Senate and talked with the governor and they would have a plan already? But he doesn't have any of those things. So it's obvious to me that he's not really for it. And the real problem is him and not the nurses. That's what my whole point was.
Well, you're right. You're absolutely right. I mean, he's the leader of the assembly. He sets the rules. He could move the bill today if he wanted to. And the fact is that he's covering for Democrats who are dependent on health insurance industry money and the donors themselves who are major funders of the leadership PAC that Speaker Rendon controls, as well as those consultants in Sacramento who fund these corporate Democrats based upon these industry contributions. So it's the nexus that you often talk about. And in fact, even a Nobel Prize-winning economist, Angus Deaton, calls healthcare, the current system, the worst example of crony capitalism. So the truth is that we could have a bill, and the speaker knew we were addressing all his concerns, and yet he killed this process. And when Dave says, oh, the bill can continue, the organizing can continue, well, of course it can, but only the legislature can legislate, and that's what people need, particularly in the face of these GOP threats to our health care. So there is high anxiety, and there's a high demand, and the responsibility is Speaker Rendon's to call the nurses who are out there who Dave champions as, oh, we've got to honor the heroes of this movement. Well, the nurses are on the front lines. The nurses are the ones pushing this bill along with their allies. And he's called the nurses deceptive and not leveling with people. Well, in fact,
that's exactly what we're doing. We're calling people's attention to the crisis in healthcare that Speaker Rendon is not addressing.
Yeah, I mean, if it wasn't for the CNA, believe me, Rendon would not be pushing a bill for single payer. There would not be a bill. He wouldn't be fixing this. Jerry Brown wouldn't be taking the reins on single payer because the nurses let us down. No, the only reason we're even goddamn talking about this is because the nurses are doing something about it. Hey, MSNBC just hired Megyn Kelly to make sure Santa Claus stays white. If you're sick of that kind of bullshit lefty corporatism from the news, support aggressive progressives right here at the Young Turks Network. You become a member for $10 a month. It gets you access to the whole show. We do an hour every week, and it gets you access to all the other member benefits at the Young Turks. Stick your thumb in the eye of the corporate news and become a member of TYT Network. Go to tytnetwork.com/join. Find out what it's all about.